Choosing a law school is one of the most stressful decisions you'll ever make. So here's what you need to know to ensure that you make the right choice. In my opinion, choosing a law school comes down to two factors. But before we get into those, we need to tackle the elephant in the room. Ranking. Does law school ranking matter? Yes, but not really. The yes comes in because obviously there's a benefit to going to a top 12 or 25 law school as opposed to going to a school outside the top 100. The not really comes in when you're comparing two schools that are relatively close in rank. Honestly, there's not much of a difference in the education that you'll get at a top 30 school versus a top 50 school. The differences come in other ways. The only time that ranking really matters is if you're planning on going into corporate law, big law, or becoming a professor. But that doesn't apply to 90% of you. Those jobs are reserved for the top 15 to 20% of students at the top 25 or so law schools. Mathematically speaking, most of you will not be pursuing that. So ranking is important, but not as much as you might think. Instead, one of the factors that you should be focused on is money. Law school is expensive, like really expensive. And unlike other graduate programs, you don't get stipends for your research and scholarships are pretty rare. So you'll be paying everything out of pocket. And in most cases, that's upwards of $30,000 or $40,000 a year. Because of this, I highly encourage you to take a serious look at any schools that are offering you money. A lot of lower ranked schools will try and bait you in with full ride scholarships, but the thing that you should be looking for are non-conditional scholarships. This means that regardless of where you rank in the class, you won't lose your scholarship. A lot of lower ranked schools don't have this, and it could be dangerous for you in the long run. If you have offers from two similarly ranked schools, I would prioritize whichever one gives you the better financial aid offer instead of whichever one might have the higher ranking. That ratings bump might be nice, but in 3 or 4 years, you'll be grateful that you took the money. Now, there's one more big factor when it comes to choosing a law school. But before we get into that, here are a couple of smaller things that you definitely should consider. First, take a look at the school's programs and specialties. If you want to get into a specialized area of law like patent law or entertainment law, take a look and see what schools offer programs in those areas and how those programs fare when it comes to stuff like job placement. If you want to get into something general like criminal defense, then almost any school will do. But if you want to do something specialized, take the time to look because not every school will offer those programs and not every program will be on the same level. Number 2, visit the school and pay close attention to the library and the study rooms. Visiting the school is always a good idea because it lets you check out the vibe and see if this is somewhere where you want to spend the next 3 years of your life. The library and the study rooms are particularly important because that's where you're going to spend most of your time. Unless you set up an office in your apartment, you will be studying on campus. And a lot of people treat law school like a 9 to 5. You show up in the morning for your classes, you stay on campus studying in the library until 5 p.m., then you go home. So having a comfortable place where you feel confident studying, it's crucial. Number 3, look around outside of the tours. I went on a fantastic tour at a school and I stuck around for a couple of hours afterward, kind of explored on my own. And I was kind of sold on the school during the tour. But then after I walked around a little bit, talked to some of the students, I changed my mind. I felt that the vibe really wasn't for me. And if I'd just gone based off of the tour and what they'd chosen to show me, I wouldn't have known what the actual environment is like. One thing that ASU did great during my tour, they had students take us to lunch. Like no faculty involved, just students and prospective students. And being able to be candid and explore on your own really will help you see what the environment truly is like. Piggybacking off of that, number 4, talk to the students. Whether this be from hanging around after a tour or reaching out to people online, I highly encourage you to talk to the current students, specifically the 2Ls and the 3Ls. These students will have a lot better idea of what law school is like and how their school fares. They'll be candid and they'll let you know what their school does well and where they could improve. And having this information from somebody who's experienced it firsthand is invaluable in making your decision. As a side note, if any of you are considering ASU, feel free to DM me over on Instagram and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about ASU or law school in particular. Now, the final big factor you should be considering when choosing your law school is location. This might seem obvious, but the location is far more important than you might realize. Not only does it decide where you're going to be living the next 3 years, but more likely than not, the location is going to decide where you're going to start and potentially end your career. If you take a look at any school and their placement stats, you'll see that the majority of students are placed in the same state as that school, and more likely than not, they're even in the same exact city. This isn't to say that you can't work in a different state, city, or even country from where you go to law school, but it will be a lot more difficult, mainly because you're missing one important thing: connections. One of the biggest determining factors in where you're going to work is who you know. For example, say you want to work in New York City, but you don't know any attorneys in the entire state of New York. The chances of you getting a job at a New York City firm are close to zero. You don't know anybody who will vouch for you or tell you about the job openings, and the firms don't really want to take a flyer on somebody who studied in a different state and studied that state's laws. Because where you go to law school, those are the state laws that you study. Here in Arizona, the examples that we get, mainly Arizona law. In New York, if you go to a New York law school, you're going to be studying New York state law. And the differences might not seem that big, but they can be drastic. And having a 3-year advantage over somebody else just because you went to school in that state can be massive. So, if you have somewhere specific that you want to work, I highly encourage you to apply to schools in that city and state in general. It will have a massive benefit to your career later on. Not to mention all of the other reasons why location is important, like housing cost, weather, and proximity to family. Because of this, I firmly believe that location is one of the 2 most important things when it comes to deciding where you want to go to law school. But you already did the hard part. You already sent in your applications and got accepted to a school. So here's everything you should expect during your first week of law school.